Oh my God, that is like amazing and kind of eerie for people to see all at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, when people get to it in the museum, you can hear the gasp when they walk around the corner and see it,
Hello and welcome to the UK Surf Show. We are your hosts. I'm Pete.
And I'm Leighton. On this episode, we speak to Jim Kempton, the surfing godfather.
This guy, Jim Kempton, has, it's just an incredible career in the surfing industry, from Surfer Magazine to Quicksilver Crossing, Billabong, Transworld, president of the California Surf Museum, Surf Rider Foundation Advisory Board, as well as being on the board of Surfing America.
It's just unbelievable. I just can't even comprehend. It's like 4 lifetimes worth of a career.
It's more than that. It's just
it's crazy.
Absolutely insane, the amount of things he's done in the surfing industry and the amount of places he's discovered as well.
Discovered surf spots, It's a really cool chat we had with him, didn't we?
Yeah, I feel like we could have probably done about 8 or 10 episodes just on Jim.
Yeah. Just on like each job role and where that took him around the world.
Yeah, absolutely incredible, and a super lovely guy as well. Just another real nice, down to. I mean, like I said in that, there's some people you could speak to, which you could say you've been editor of a magazine, you've been at Quicksilver, you've been at Billabong, and they could be quite, I've been this. And he's just so humble and just was just. Felt so incredibly lucky to have the career that he's had.
And he was around, like the main part of his career, like the really successful part of it was, when surfing really, really took off in the early 80s.
Yeah, so, late 70s, early 80s, when it all changed and became what it is today.
He's a major, major figure in surf industry.
Yeah. Before we jump into this interview, don't forget, head over to North Core and you can get 15% off anything you order. And the code is now changed to Surf Show. That's SURFSHOW. And that is valid till the 30th of September 2021.
Let's go.
Hi, this is Jim Kempton.
Hi, Jim. Well, it's an absolute honour to have you on the show. So you have the most impressive surfing CV, I think, of anybody on this planet. It's just unbelievable. So what I'll do, I'll get Pete to read it out, because we had to write it all down because I couldn't remember it all. So I'll get Pete to read it out.
If I miss anything, I do apologise, but I've got Editor-in-Chief of Surf Magazine, Quicksilver, Director at Quicksilver Crossing, Billabong Media Director, Transworld Publications, President of the California Surfing Museum, Surf Rider Foundation Advisory Board, as well as on the board of Surfing America. Is there anything I missed? Oh, and author.
Nothing else matters anyway.
And obviously author of your new book, which we'll come on to. So what an unbelievable work life you've had in surfing.
Yeah, I think I've probably been the luckiest guy in the world, period. But, I'll take it.
So how did it all start?
Well, funnily enough, you're going to find me far more relevant to the UK program than you might think. One of my first experiences outside of the United States surfing on my own was I went to school in England back just before the meteor hit that killed the dinosaurs. And there was a thriving surf culture in Cornwall, even at that time. And I was going to school in Sussex. University in Sussex, and studying English, and so every weekend I would take the train down to Cornwall and surf Newquay and Porthleven and St. Ives, and I got to know all of the guys that were there then, who were probably all long gone, but I know some are still there. Roger Mansfield, are you guys out of Cornwall?
We're probably about an hour and 45 minutes, maybe 2 hours from Cornwall. So we're closer to North Devon.
Oh, got it. Well, that's beautiful. And I surf Devon as well, and Wales too, Mumbles and that whole area. So, but one of my really old and dear friends is Roger Mansfield, who I know has recently, or sometime fairly recently, written a history of British surfing. So that's how far back I go.
Wow, it's going to be so lovely for the UK listeners to hear that somebody with all the experience that you've had in surf media has like kind of surfed over here and spent a good amount of time doing it, and in all the places that they all love.
How did you find surfing over here?
Cold. One of the really, really amazing things, which I'm sure you know, but one of the most amazing things is how warm it gets in the summer. I mean, when I say that, I mean it's very, very comfortable in a wetsuit. It was very comfortable in a wetsuit for me in the summer because of the Gulf Stream, hitting the tip of Cornwall the way it does.
Yeah.
And and that whole southern end of England. And so that was really beautiful. And the English surfers, I surfed a lot in Biarritz and the whole Basque Country area for years and years after that as well. But English surfers are just so keen and so passionate and so dedicated. It's kind of amazing. And the surf is really good. Although I think the discoveries of new ledges like Port Talon and Port Leven has really grown, and that there's a lot more spots now than there were. We surfed mostly beach breaks in those days.
Yeah. There's a load of them now. Even like if you go over to Ireland as well, and Mulligan and stuff like that, there's just huge waves, and I think mixture of the culture in the UK growing and people talking, and then you've got stuff like Google Maps now. So I don't think realistically there's any such thing as a secret spot anymore. You can look on Google Maps and you go, oh look, there's something there. And I think that's helped massively. And there's just surfers everywhere in the UK now.
Yeah. And so how did surfing in the UK compared to like the US? How did you find it? Were we up there with the quality of waves, or
the quality of surf? I mean, you get a lot of north swell. Out of the north, it's a huge swell pattern. And and it's the same one that that hits France. So the Channel Islands. I mean, I actually surfed in Ireland as well. Never in Scotland, but I surfed in Ireland just a bit. But it was back. I haven't surfed there for 20, 30 years now. So
yeah,
it's hard for me to remember. But it wasn't the places that wasn't. Well, we never surfed the Cliffs of Moher. That seemed absolutely out of the question. As are so many places I went to when we were younger. We went when we went to Tahiti. We looked at we looked at Chopu and watched it for about half an hour and said, "Well, that's unsurfable. So let's go somewhere else."
We know that feeling.
Yeah. We know that feeling. We go out on a day which is over 8 foot, and we go, "No, that's unsurfable." We go home.
Yeah. Right. I mean, we were the only thing I ever remember about big wave places. There's one right outside of Saint Jean de Luz, which I know you guys all know as well. And all we remember about it is that that all the boats, all the fishing boats, avoided that area like the plague.
Yeah.
Never occurred to us that was the reason.
Yeah, it's got to be. So, you were born in Guam, is that right?
Yes.
Habaday.
Yeah, my Habaday.
Yeah.
My parents were in civil service, so we traveled around a lot and lived in various places in the South Pacific and Southeast Asia when I was growing up.
So did you grew up surfing, or was there a certain point where you can look back and you go, actually, that's where I started surfing?
No, we definitely, I started surfing in 1962, which just only indicates how really old I am. But yeah, and it was funny because it came really quickly because of Hawaii. People, the way you flew to Guam was through Hawaii, because in those days they didn't have direct flights. So everyone in Hawaii had already been surfing a long time, and so that transferred over to Guam quite quickly.
Yeah,
your starting kind of surfing life started as a young boy then in Guam, was it, or was it? Yeah,
that's where I learned to surf Talafofo Bay. You sound like you might know something about it since you knew half a day, but maybe that's just like Ohio Gozaimasu. I don't know.
No, we'd love to go. Since doing this podcast, we get told of so many beautiful places around the world, and just like, we're definitely going there one day. So you've just added another one to the list.
Our surf trip, I think we've got to be going up into the hundreds of thousands of pounds of cost now, where if you look at a map of the places we want to go or the places we've been told about, are just insane. So if we and then you said, you grew up there, and then you moved to California?
Moved to California in 1965, and sort of right at the height of the first boom of surfing, and moved to San Diego, and so surfed La Jolla and Pacific Beach and Ocean Beach and all of those places. Went to the 1966 World Surf Contest that was held in San Diego. Met Duka Hanamoku while he was there, and of course all the other surfers were not available to but Duke was there, shaking everyone's hand. In fact, that's how I talked my mom and dad into driving me down there. I was only 12 or something, but when I told my mom that Duke Hanamoku was going to be there, she said, "Okay, we'll go." nobody else met Joy Cabell, Jock Sutherland, Joyce Hoffman. That didn't matter at all. I didn't know who they were, but man, Duke Hanamoku was good enough to drive down to the beach. So,
well, he was the most famous surfer of the time, wasn't he? He was.
Oh yeah. Well, and my parents knew him from the Olympics and swimming.
Yeah.
He was the Michael Phelps of that era and more.
Yeah. So then, through that time in California, you were surfing, obviously. And how did it come about that you started at Surfer Magazine?
So it's kind of a long convoluted story, but actually the whole England part of it and my travels really helped, because I'd been traveling, going surfing as many places as I could get to. So I had been a lot of places in the world, and so Steve Pesman, who was the then the editor and publisher of Surfer, I just happened to, in those days, it's so different from everything now, but in those days, in just about any business, particularly in surfing, you could just show up and walk in the door, and no appointment needed. There were just so many fewer people than there are now. And so I walked in and got an audience with the publisher of the magazine, and he said, "Hey, why don't we try and do this thing called the Surf Report? I've had this idea about the Surf Report, and you've traveled all over the world, and people that can send us Surf Report information every day." So I said, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's start." And
that sounds brilliant.
It's the dream job for a surfer, isn't it? Really, it's just unbelievable. I don't recommend this to anybody who's trying to get a job now, graduated from college or just starting out, because I think it's the world has changed. But in those days, it actually did pay off to pursue the things that you really loved.
Yeah.
And most of that was because people that were older had no clue about how to market to this gigantic youth market that had just arrived.
Yeah.
And they didn't know about it in music. They didn't know the difference between Jefferson Airplane and the Peanut Butter Conspiracy. They were clueless. So they had to hire people that were in that demographic bulge to be able to market properly. And it was the same with surfing. There was just so little known, and there was such a huge kind of unknown, untapped market. I'll tell you a story about England that I know you guys will enjoy and your audience will enjoy. But when I was going to school over there, the King's Road still is, but the King's Road was the fashion, cool street to be on. And as you know, England has like a summer for 3 weeks, and I had gone into London from school, and I'd worn one of my Hawaiian shirts, because it was one of the only times that you could wear it was in late May, when it was really beautiful weather. And but the deal is you had to get back to school on the train, or else you'd get caught in London, and it was really expensive to have to stay in London. So I was rushing back. I had gotten to the Sloane Square tube station, and I was walking down to the tube, and this guy stopped me at the platform. He said, "I'll give you 50 quid for that shirt."
I'm really pleased you said quid then as well.
Right. The look on my face, he must have thought I didn't understand. So he said, "I'll give you 50 pounds sterling for that shirt." And I said, "I know what a quid is, but what do you want my shirt for?" He said, "You're from California, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're a surfer, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I want that shirt." And I said, "Well, I'm calculating now in my mind, at that time, 50 pounds was $125. It was the opposite of how it is now. It was, the pound was very strong. And so I'm calculating, and in those days, there was this book, Frommer's on $5 a day, right? Europe on $5 a day. And the joke among students was, if you were paying $5 a day to live in Europe, you were new. It was like, nobody, that was for tourists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm making this calculation. I'm thinking that's like 3 months. That's the summer in Biarritz. I'm going to be out of school in like 3 weeks, and it's an entire summer in France. So I said to him, "Hey, look, I'd really love to do this, but I don't have another shirt." And he took the 50-pound note out of his pocket and he held it up to me and he said, "I want that shirt. Take it off right now."
It's almost like a forced
for 2.5 hours on the train to Sussex with no shirt on.
I'm so pleased you ended up doing that. And then did you spend the whole summer in Biarritz after that?
I did. I spent most of it. But the really great thing was, one, I realized right then, this is like 1974. So what I realized is that one, this surfing thing was a lot bigger than just a bunch of us that were, traveling around outside the United States and surfing. And the second thing was I knew what I was going to write my business master's thesis on. I was getting an MBA then. And I thought, wow, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back and I'm going to go, because in California, you could buy Hawaiian shirts at the thrift shops, which is where everybody surfed. Where everybody shopped, because there wasn't a surfing market. There wasn't an industry yet. Nobody was making clothes. There were board shorts, but that was it. So when I got back, I went to every single thrift store from San Francisco to San Diego and bought Hawaiian shirts for 50 cents a piece, and put them in a giant container and shipped them to London. And I financed my surf travels for about 4 years like that.
Oh my God, that is so cool. And I don't know if you guys know Roger Mansfield. I don't know if you know of him or
know of him, but yeah, don't know him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a really fabulous guy, and he actually wrote a story about it from the English point of view, of me showing up in Newquay with a Volkswagen bus full of Hawaiian shirts back in those days. So anyway, that's how I sort of financed my travels to other places, to Australia and to Japan and to all over Europe and every year in Hawaii and so so then when I ran into Steve Pesman at Surfer, it was how I got my first gig there, and it really didn't pan out because he never got it together. But as it turned out, he needed an editor, and so after a few weeks of working together, he offered me a job. And of course, kind of like in those days when you were young and stupid, you sort of always felt like you had to play hard to get, like with a girl that you thought liked you. You never wanted to show them that you were too interested,
Yeah.
Because so I said, well, let me think about it. This is like a Friday, and I said, let me think about it, and I'll let you know on Monday. So of course, driving home, I'm just giggling, laughing, thinking, God, they're going to pay me. Doesn't he know I do this for free? And that's my first thing. And then the second thing is, oh my God, what if he hires somebody between now and then, and I've blown this, this dream job. So the whole weekend I was stressing, waking up at night in a cold sweat, going, oh God, I'm going to lose this. He's already hired someone else. I'm never going to get there. So anyway, I was waiting until the 9 o'clock, hour hit so I could call and see if the job was still there. And sure enough, he hadn't hired anybody over the weekend. And so there I was.
Well, I suppose at that point, there's not going to be many people he's going to come in contact with that has done the amount of travel that you have in surfing as well. So you were kind of a bit unique, really, to him. So
it was. I tell people that people always ask me, how did you become... how did you go from becoming an associate editor to being the publisher of the magazine in 3 years? And I said, I had the weirdest combination of skill set that you could ever imagine for that time. I had a degree in English with an emphasis in journalism. I had an MBA, and I'd been surfing for 20 years. And, probably there was only one person in the whole world that had that weird combination. Business people don't know about English, and English people don't know about surfers, and surfers don't write and read. So like I was like very unique.
So that wasn't planned then? None of that was planned. That just all happened. It was almost like the stars aligned for you and gave you just the perfect job as a surfer, really.
It really did. It was a complete. I had no idea where I was going, with anything. I was just doing what I liked doing. And so that's why I think so many people in my generation, always say, "Oh, follow your bliss, do what you love." But really, it was because of the time. I don't think that that's something that will always fit for all generations and all all situations.
Yeah, I was sort of going to say that, because if you'd been born in, say, 1980 or something like that,
too late.
Yeah, too late. Nothing, that wouldn't have happened. The way things work. Like even if you were born, say, 20 years ago now, with the way social media and everything is online, none of those things would happen anymore. Your whole career would be completely different.
Yeah,
exactly.
Hey, you might have been a blogger.
Right.
So how long were you at Surfboard magazine for then?
So I was there for about 10 years. I was there from actually more. I started in 1977 and was there until 1986.
Wow, so you saw the real boom in surfing then, and especially like the early 1980s.
It was I call myself like I'm part of the bridge generation. We learned on longboards when there was nothing but longboards. And then we had to make the transition to learning how to surf shortboards, which was really hard, for most people. And especially because initially nobody knew what worked with shortboards. Everyone had, refined longboards to this, to really working. You wanted a nose rider, or you wanted a loose turning board, or you wanted a board with speed and down rails. All of that was known. But the moment that you shortened the boards up, no one knew what was going on. And they were kind of following the George Greeno concept of, a beveled bottom, on a knee board, because that was what he was using, which of course had nothing to do with standing up. And I remember one of my very first jobs, I was working at Surfboards Hawaii in Encinitas, California, is where the shop was. And then in the afternoons we'd all go down, and Billy Hamilton, who was a major surf star at the time, was shaping there. So he had just gotten back from Australia with a lot of the guys, and had met McTavish and was shaping V bottoms. And so we'd go down to Moonlight Beach, right down the street from the shop, and we'd watch him surf. And of course he'd go out on these boards, and we just think, "Oh my God, we got to get one of those. It's unbelievable how those things work," right? Not really realizing that Billy could have been riding a telephone pole and looked elegant.
I was just going to say that same thing. It's not, you see someone riding a board and you think, like, "Oh my God, I'm going to surf like that if I get that board." And it don't work like that.
So that probably set our surfing back about 6 months. But eventually, of course, people figured out pretty quickly what worked and what didn't. And so then we made the transition to shorter boards. But the era, that era from like sort of 1977 to 1986 was so pivotal in so many ways, because it was the beginning of the professional surfing circuit, that had never existed before that. It was the advent of both the twin fin and the thruster, which then, the thruster was the board for 20 years. After that, nobody ever surfed anything else until, kind of the turn of the millennium. And it was a real change socially, from sort of the California dominance, which had been sort of surfing's centerpiece, combined with Hawaii, of course, up until that time, and then sort of switching over to the Australian dominance and and the South African influence, and worldwide, kind of surfing going more worldwide, and then the huge surf industry explosion, to serve that marketplace. So it was a real pivotal, real exciting time. It was a fabulous time to be involved with the surf industry, and a great time to live through.
Yeah. It sounds like
you were there just like the perfect time on everything then, weren't you? Like as a surfer, what a amazing thing to be part of that surf industry right at the start of the explosion. That is just so lucky, isn't it?
So was Transworld, was that part of Surfer Magazine, or was that separate to Surfer Magazine?
No, it eventually became, they bought it, but that was only a few years ago. They weren't even in existence. I mean, the Transworld skateboarding wasn't even started then. It didn't start until the 90s.
Yeah.
So after the Surfer magazine, then when you left there, where did you go from there? Was that on to Quicksilver after that?
No, I'm mistaken about that. It was actually Transworld had started earlier than that. I went to Transworld from Surfer, and they had just started the Snowboard magazine, and that's another sort of part of the story that I didn't mention, but they brought me in because of my publishing experience, because Transworld had really been developed. I mean, they were all really bright, really talented people, but they weren't really knowledgeable about publishing, because the reason it had been started is that Thrasher, which I'm sure you're familiar with as well.
Yeah.
Thrasher was such a kind of wild, crazy, in their minds, negative view of skateboarding.
Yeah.
And the whole industry was afraid that, that parents and even kids were going to be turned off by that, and that their product wasn't going to be able to sustain. So they all said, well, Larry Balmo, who was starting it, if you start this magazine, we'll all support you with ads, which is all you need for a magazine, right?
Yeah.
You don't really even need readers. If you've got enough advertisers, you can make money just straight away. But they didn't really know much about it, so they were just making the magazine because they had no real risk. So when they wanted to start Snowboarding magazine and expand, they needed some publishing experience. So they offered me a gig there, and so we got to travel to almost every single one. Of the things that we of course needed to do is open up all of the snow resorts to snowboarding. Many of them were really resistant to it because it was kind of the skateboarder element, and it was the young kids and wild and crazy, and they wanted the 50-year-old, doctor or airline pilot with his family on Thanksgiving to come, and so one of our jobs was to go to all these resorts and try to talk them into allowing snowboarding to be on the mountain. So I got to travel for like 3 or 4 years. I got to travel the entire winter just going to all these resorts and snowboarding.
Oh, wow.
And, we went from Mammoth to Stowe in New Hampshire and everywhere in between, and to all of the resorts in Canada and Colorado and Utah and Montana. It was fabulous.
You've just had the best jobs. Me and Peter sat here thinking, we've definitely zigged when we should have zagged.
Yeah. As I say, I really feel lucky because none of that was of my sort of. I didn't set out with any career path or knowledge of that. All of that just sort of fell in, and it helped to have some education and some business background and an ability to at least be competent in your writing. But it wasn't something that I imagined or that I set a career path with. It just kind of rolled out.
I think it's coming across really nice as well, of how humble you are about the whole everything you've done. Like a lot of people could have gone the other way and been like, I was editor of Surfer magazine, I was this, and the fact that you're saying like I was just unbelievably lucky, and
really appreciating like you saw the opportunities. It sounds like that you've been offered, and it affords you to do the thing you love as a job, which is just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then you went on to Quicksilver, and if I'm getting it right, what I've read about it, you're more or less responsible for sending Quicksilver worldwide.
Well, I don't know. That's giving me way too much credit, but
but it's true.
No. It was really the crossing. It was the crossing boat, which was the Indies Trader. And really the credit for setting that up was really with Bruce Raymond. Bruce Raymond had been slogging as an executive at Quicksilver years and years. He went out on a surf trip with Martin Daly, who owned the Indies Trader at the time, and saw all these waves in the Mentawais that Martin had been surfing. And the next trip he took Tommy Carroll on his birthday. And so they went out and surfed it, and Tommy sent an email out with pictures, and 3 weeks later, Martin had more people wanting to be on his boat and take him out to the surf than he had in his entire year of trying to do salvage work
Yeah.
out there. And he, by the way, had actually discovered the Mentawais because he owned this salvage boat, and they would go out and take all this stuff off the wrecks that were left on the reefs.
Yeah.
And suddenly he realized the reason that there were so many wrecks there is because people would tie up on the reef at night, and then there'd be a 6-foot swell and throw the boat up onto the reef and tear the bottom out of it. And it was more expensive to get it towed back than to just abandon it.
Yeah.
So after a while, he realized, God, this is a wave field, and so anyway, that's how it started. And then what Bruce decided was that we should take this exploration concept around the world. So Quicksilver hired me to kind of be the director of that whole program.
Wow.
And so we spent, I don't know, 4 years or so traveling, literally looking in every nook and cranny for discovering new waves. And we found about 120 of them.
Wow. So you found these waves that have never been surfed before. And
well, at least not that we knew of. I mean, who knows who surfed them and been long gone. But they were certainly waves that had never been identified and photographed before.
Wow. I'm just blown away by that thought. And you get paid to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Me too. I kind of can't believe it either.
So you got so much on your CV. We'll skim through it because we could just be here for hours.
Yeah, we could probably do about 8 episodes on you, to be honest.
Yeah, just on your carear. Yeah. Yeah, and then it was over to Billabong after that as a media director.
I went to Billabong, and they asked me to come on there. They were growing, and they were looking for media exposure and try to build, not so much for the general media so much as to reach the social media market, which there was a huge need there, and they just needed to feed the beast like everyone.
Yeah.
So, but I also ended up running all of their surf camps, which was an idea that I pitched to them. It had actually been Bob McKnight, who owns Quicksilver's, idea, and he had pitched me and said, "Hey, would you try and set this up?" And so I did with Quicksilver. And then nobody in the marketing department wanted to underwrite it. So Bob said, "God, I'm embarrassed, but can't get this thing off the ground." So, but Billabong had heard about it, so Billabong offered me to do that as well. So that was really great because it afforded me to set up a program called Surf with a Pro, which brought Dave Rostovich and all of the huge Billabong team, Donovan. All of the guys actually ended up being it. Shane Dorian and Mike Parsons and all of the writers for Billabong, Joel and Mick and Andy. Everyone eventually went on it, and what we would do is just plan a surf trip, and then one or two of those pros would come, and we would and so we'd fill a surf trip up. And go to all these different places, from the Mentawais to Central America to South America to Peru, all of these different spots, and bring a pro, and that always filled the trip up. So that was part of my job at Billabong that made it really fun.
Wow, what an incredible! I can't get over it. Actually,
every story you're saying about fun places you worked, we just sat there afterwards, and I think we could half going into a dream of thinking like, what would that be like? That would just be it. That would be the complete dream. Basically, I'm sort of working out your whole career. I'm going to take back something I said. Your whole career has worked on you going, right, I want to surf, and where can I surf best, and how can somebody pay for that for me to do it?
Yeah. And that all started off with the Hawaiian shirts.
Yes.
Oh man.
In England. So there you go. I have the UK to thank for my entire career.
And then we move on to now. So you're still president of the California Surfing Museum?
I am. You were talking about the book, and the reason I bring that up at this moment is because the California Surf Museum has a connection to that, in that about 10 years ago, we thought we would do a major exhibit on women. And so we spent a couple of years researching it. And so we obviously learned a lot about it and realized that, doing the history of women surfing is doing the history of surfing. because the women were there from the very, very beginning. And so we did it, and it was a very successful exhibit, maybe the most successful exhibit we've ever done. Part of that was I'm always looking for ways to expand the audience at the museum. So I came up with this idea that we would do swimsuits through all these periods of time, because we had some from the very, very early years in our collection at the museum. And that would bring a lot of women who might not care that much about surfing, but they all love fashion. And as it turned out, Jansen had this huge collection of antique. They'd kept all their suits from like 1910 onwards that they had. So they had all kinds of stuff. And then you go to the vintage swimwear stuff, and there's just piles of stuff there. So anyway, we ended up doing that. And as it turned out, that brought us our biggest exhibit that we have there, which is the Bethany Hamilton surfboard. And that happened quite by serendipity as well. I had some really good friends that I went surfing with all the time in Mexico when I was going to school in San Diego, and then lost track of everybody, when you start traveling all over the world, because in those days, the only way you could connect with people is by letter. So once you lost their address, that was it. Yeah. They were gone from your connections. And so anyway, I ran into one of them down in Costa Rica, and we were laughing and talking about old times. I said, "Hey, whatever happened to Tom?" And he said, "Yeah, well, Tom moved to Kauai about 20 years ago." And I said, "Well, that explains that." I go, "You got to move to Kauai. It's kind of like a black hole. No one ever hears from you again." And he said, "Tom's Bethany's dad, don't you?" And I said, "Tom Hamilton is Bethany's dad?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm gonna. My phone wasn't working down there, so he said, I'm gonna give him your phone number when I see him." And then, so I got back to Billabong, and I'm listening to the hundreds of messages you get after you've been gone for a month, and all of a sudden one comes up and says, "Hey, Jim, it's Tom Hamilton." Well, I used to be Tom Hamilton. Now I'm just Bethany's dad. I kept the message until it automatically, erased for about 6 months, just because I got such a big kick out of it. So we started talking, and I was telling him about this exhibit, and I said, what we're doing is I get a picture of a woman, and then I try to find the wetsuit or the swimsuit and the surfboard, and then I put the swimsuit and the surfboard, into the exhibit with the picture, and then people can see, they can relate. And he says, "Well, do you want Bethany's board?" And I said, "What board?" He goes, "The board." I go, "You got to be kidding me, right?" And you kept it, and he said, "Yeah, it's up in the rafters, and quite frankly, I'd rather have you guys have it than us." Wow. And I said, "Well, sure, we'd love to have it, And then he said, "Well, do you want the swimsuit too?"
Oh my God.
And I said, "You're kidding. He said, "Yeah, what were we going to do with it, So he shipped them both over, and now they are kind of we call it our Mona Lisa,
Yeah, I bet.
I'm not surprised.
Oh my God, that is like amazing and kind of eerie for people to see all at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, when people get to it in the museum, you can hear the gasp when they walk around the corner and see it, It's, it's a bite that goes all the way to the stringer.
Oh my God.
Man.
It's almost
it's pretty spectacular.
It's almost like how you would imagine a surfboard to look like once a shark is, almost like that cartoon kind of drawing of a shark bite through it. So, what an amazing thing to have in the museum. So that exhibit then led on to the book that you've now published.
So I'd done another book called First We Surf, Then We Eat, and it was a cookbook that really was just an excuse for me to tell stories about traveling and all the food that is there. And I had all my life, I'd loved to cook, and my parents loved to cook, and we'd lived in all these different places. And so I'd kept all these recipes, and especially ones, with friends that I'd stayed with in different places that I really liked the food for. And so this literary agent bid on it. And then she said, "Well, what are you going to do for your second book?" And I had written other books before that, I should say. This was the first book that I would call was done by traditional publishing. Yeah. And before that, people would just come to me and say, "Hey, we'd like you to write this book. And I would give them a fee, and they'd say, well, don't you want to have it be, with the publisher and get royalties? And I'd say, no, I don't know anything about the publishing world. And I just, if you pay me, I'm happy. If you sell one copy, or if you sell 1 million copies, I won't be unhappy. So, that's what we ended up doing.
Yeah.
And so with this book, she said, well, what are you going to do for what are you going to do next? And I said, well, how about a history of women's surfing? She said, that's fabulous. I can sell that in a heartbeat. The timing's perfect. Everything is perfect for it because, the Olympics are coming up and the whole Me Too movement and the women's struggles and et cetera, and surfing sexy and cool and fun. And there's a lot to it. So I said, great. So and I don't think I could have done it if I hadn't had this framework from the exhibit, because I kind of had the historical breadth down, the chronology kind of in place, but we really only did about 30 or 40 women because that's all we had time to do. So I just decided that I was going to do a deep dive. I started with the 1600s and, the earliest surfboard that they have on record that they've discovered was somewhere in the sort of 1630s, 1640s, or somewhere in the 1600s, and it belonged to a princess.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? That surfing was that long ago, that's really hard to comprehend, isn't it? But what an incredible thing, and the fact that it was a woman as well that owned that board. Yeah,
and from there it just got all the more incredible. I just discovered so many amazing things about women surfing and about their, about the struggle they go through versus, just your run-of-the-mill guy surfer who still has struggles, but nothing like the women and just the differences. I have this one little section called "It's Good to Be Queen," and it's talking about this princess, and there's quite a bit of literature on her from the Hawaiian oral tradition. And so anyway, I said just about the time that Queen. I can't even pronounce her name right now because I'm not looking at it. But, about the time she was, rolling across the waves, Anne Boleyn's head was rolling into the basket. Yeah. And, I said, it's good to be queen if you're from Hawaii.
Well, I was going to say, I know what you were saying because I received the PDF copy of your book this morning. I was skimming through it. And I was looking at some of the names, and I couldn't even pronounce them while I was trying to read them, let alone off memory. So, But it's interesting you should say it like the Women and Waves, because we've spoken to one group that's in the UK here, which is Wave Wahinis, and Yvette has set up a surf club specifically for women, and women and young women. And there seems to be more and more of them. There's a few that I know of now throughout the UK, and I presume that's the same worldwide. But as you're saying, it says in the book, a lot of it goes back to the princesses and the queens and what was the title? The sport of goddesses or something? I can't remember what the first bit of the title was off the top of my head. But yeah, it's just incredible. That research must have taken you, well, a lifetime.
Yeah.
Well, it does do that. And it helped that I knew a lot of women, from surfing, from, of course, the magazines and traveling and all of that. And there's actually a huge section, I should say, there are several good-sized sections of the surfing history of women in the UK. So, there's Gwen, and I'm
Agatha Christie.
Pardon?
Agatha Christie, is she in there?
Agatha Christie, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking like early '60s girls and early '70s girls and all the. So I went through it all, and Roger was a huge help. He sent me the names and connected me up with a lot of the women there, and I did about 130 interviews for the book. And there's probably there's over 700, not quite 800 women that are actually in the book.
Wow.
And so it's really an attempt to be comprehensive, because once you get into it, there's this, who do you leave out? It's easy to do the top 20, and then you can sort of do the top 40 by being very selective. But then you get to a stage where, there's the longboard women world champions and the shortboard women world champions and all of a sudden there's just all these different categories of professionals and amateurs and so they all have titles and they're all over the world, and you just realize I have to try to do everybody. I want to try to get everyone into this book that is available. Of course, the closer you get to today, the more inaccurate that becomes, because I know I've missed people.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of women. I would say there are probably at least 50 women that I mentioned from England or from Europe, from the UK.
Yeah. Well, I know I was reading on the back of the book, and the Women's International Surfing Association say that this is going to be the gold standard for women's surfing history around the world. So, I mean, it's pretty in-depth, I think, there.
I sure hope so, anyway. I'm really looking forward to, the excitement among the women in particular has been really, really rewarding to me. I mean, there are, the shops say, I sent out a note that, I just got this book and I sold 4, online that day.
Yeah.
Which is unheard of. I mean, in my experience with books.
So is it out now, or is it release date yet?
So they said, I want a book and here's my money, and when it comes in, I'll come and get it.
Pre-sale, yeah.
Yeah, pre-sale.
Amazing.
So it actually, the first edition is actually, it may be sold out by now, and we're going to have to do a second printing. So that's good news. I mean, that's an exciting thing to have. And one of the things that I really was so excited to talk to you guys about is that I do know how passionate, people in England, and I mean, you guys have doctorate degrees in surfing. We can't even find people who have a doctorate degree that surf.
Oh man!
So it's I mean, I know how passionate it is, and I know that more and more women are surfing there, and I would love to just to be able to get. I'd love to be able to get to England. I'll tell you, I would. It was one of my favorite places, and it really is one of my favorite places in the world. And if it wasn't so dang cold, it would be hard to get me away.
Well, if you do come over, then hit us up. We'll be absolutely honoured to go surfing with you. And now we have a wave garden over here as well, so the water's not quite as cold in the wave garden. So.
Well, in the summer,
yeah. So it's just
where is that located?
I don't know if you know Bristol. So
sure.
It's So it's called the Wave. And it's opened about 2 years ago now, coming up 2 years. Yeah. Obviously, they've had a terrible first couple of years with COVID because they kept getting shut down and opened again. But, they're still hanging in there, and it's a cool place. It really is. It's been made, just perfectly. It's all sustainable timbers there, and the waves are really good. There's loads of different options and settings, and we're about 20 minutes away from that. So if you wanted to come over and try it out, I think now is it 20 degrees in the water now in the summer?
20 degrees in the water. So
so that's pretty okay.
It's board shorts.
68 Fahrenheit on yours then,
68. Right.
Yeah, so
that was quick maths,
wasn't it? That's it's good for me. But so looking back at your on to writing the book and looking back at your whole career, what would you say are your standout moments, which you think the things that you're most proud of in your whole career?
Boy,
that's going to be a really hard question with a career like yours.
One of the things I'm proud of is at Surfer Magazine, developing the number of subscriptions we had. I don't take credit for the fact that we made a lot of money during my era at Surfer, because the market was just there. It was growing, and we just went along for the ride. But when you talk about subscribers, and this is old history for people who are on the internet now, but we still know that that the number of eyes and eyeballs are really important to the success of any media program. And when I started at Surfer, we had 13,000 subscribers. And when I left, we had 86,000 subscribers.
Wow, that's quite an increase.
And the thing about that I feel like, I'm proud of, because I think you can take credit for that, because that's someone saying, I'm going to buy 12 products in advance for the year on the belief that it's going to be as good as the one I'm getting now.
Yeah.
And that means you really have to understand your audience. You really have to be in tune with your reader and know what they like and what they maybe don't even know they like.
Yeah.
You kind of have to be ahead of the curve with them. So I'm really proud of that, I guess. And boy, I don't know. Well, I'm really proud about when we did the Crossing Boat, the Crossing Boat program with Quicksilver with the Indies Trader. One of the programs that I started there was a thing called Reef Check, and it was started by a USC marine biologist, and he had come up with this idea of how to map an area of a reef to give you information about it. And it was intended to be a baseline. So we took a marine biologist on the boat on almost all of our trips, and they would go out and do this reef check. And then we turned that information over to UNESCO, to the United Nations people, and they had a baseline for the health of a reef that were like literally, as I said, like probably a couple of hundred of them that had never even been discovered before or had certainly never been mapped, and then many others that that we were able to give a baseline that said in 2004 or 2003 this was the health of the reef, this was the status of the reef. And then if you come back, whether it's getting better or worse. You have a baseline to deal with. So that I feel like was a contribution to some sort of good in the world that I'm happy I was able to be able to help with.
Yeah, definitely, because surfers are kind of environmentally minded anyway, aren't they? So what an amazing part of that job to be able to give something back, for nothing. You're there doing it anyway, and that's what valuable information, especially with the state of the way the world is at the moment. Anyway.
Yeah.
Right. One question we've asked people, which is going to be extremely valuable, I think, from you, is if you could surf one place in the world for the rest of your life, where would it be? And seeing as someone who has surfed probably the entire planet and discovered places that with people that have never been surfed and places that have never been surfed, what would you say that is?
So we kind of have to define it tighter. Like, are we talking about if as it is today, or if it didn't have any crowds?
If it didn't have any crowds, it was just you, and that was where you were going to surf for the rest of your life, or you and a few good mates. Wow.
I don't know. I think as funny as this sounds, I think it would either be Noosa Heads or it would be Malibu.
Really? And is Malibu now one of your home breaks, as you'd say?
Well, it's one of those places where you paddle along. I mean, I surf Malibu about once or twice a summer,
Yeah.
And because it's always crowded, and basically just like lowers, you just have to pounce on anything that moves that isn't taken up. But if I could go back to the era when Tube Steak had a shack on the beach and Gidget was just showing up, and Mickey was the only really good surfer there. And if I could have Malibu or Noosa Heads, I surfed Noosa Heads in 1971, and if I could have it like that again, I'd never surf anywhere else. They're just perfect point waves. And whether you're the best surfer in the world, I mean, Trussell's would be another one that I would sort of look at, but it doesn't compare to Malibu's length and perfection, nor does or Noosa's. And I mean, they're just perfect point waves in there, and whether you're Taj Burrow or Andy, or Kelly Slater, or whether you're a guy like me, it's challenging. You can put as much challenge into it as you want. So it's a wave. They're makeable waves. They're kind of perfect waves. They're consistent, and they're just so much fun to ride.
Yeah, that's a hell of an answer. That was that was a really good answer. And another question for you, which is, as I say, someone with a career like yours in surfing, how much has surfing changed over your career, and do you think it's changed for the better or the worse?
So that's one I have to think just a minute about as well. But obviously, the appeal, in my opinion, of surfing is not competitive. And that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate and even enjoy immensely the competitive aspect of surfing, because it showcases the incredible talent and it pushes, all of our abilities to learn how to, to have more fun on waves by people who are that good. But I don't think anybody actually starts surfing because they want to be a pro surfer.
Yeah.
I think an awful lot of kids start playing a sport and they sort of imagine themselves at the end of the day becoming, in their dreams, becoming that. I don't think anyone starts surfing so they can become a professional surfer. I think the appeal of it is kind of the opposite, that it's nobody tells you what to do. You don't have to wear a uniform. You don't have to compete against anybody or beat anybody else. It's all about having fun and enjoying this thing you're doing. And I think that still is the primary attraction of surfing. And I think what's changed today is the idea that up until a very short time ago, and by the way, this has changed again, but up until a very short time ago, the brands had tended to dominate the perception of the surfing culture. They controlled it, not entirely, but they had a lot to do with the controlling of it. And it wasn't until I sort of stepped away from the industry and realized how ridiculous it was to think that someone was cool because they wore this little logo on their shirt or their board shorts or even their surfboard, and how unrealistic that really is, and how maybe even unhealthy it is. And one of the great things about the current status is that the collapse of the brands have really sent the surfers back to a more, I think, authentic involvement with the culture. Yeah. So now you see kids shopping at thrift stores again, just like we did, because there wasn't anything there. Because they don't need to be, whether they'll be wearing a brand, and I won't name anyone because they're all equally involved in this, whether they're super successful or not. But they and everyone says, oh, the culture's gone retro, and I said, kids don't drive Volkswagen buses because it's retro. They drive them because they're functional, because they can live in them. They can stick their board in them and lock it up without having to, put lock racks on. They love a single fin with a big, wide fin, because they love, getting that feeling of loading up before you're turning and just getting this giant G-force spurt that you never get with three fins.
Yeah.
And those things are being rediscovered, and the kind of pure joy surfing is, I think, being really rediscovered, where people can ride any kind of equipment and not worry about it, can ride any kind of board, they can wear any color they want. And over the years, it's sort of been, black wetsuit, white surfboard, no logo, to, everything's got to be neon, to everything's got to be this board short length. And you would never think of paddling out on without the right board shorts and without the right surfboard in most of the period of surfing between, say, 1970 and 2000. You just wouldn't do it. And now I see kids going out, and one of them's, 5 kids, they're all friends. They go out on an Alaya, and they go out on a twin fin, and they go out on a longboard, and they go out on a thruster, and they go out on a boogie board, and they're all having fun, and there's no judgment. They're perfectly happy riding whatever equipment they're riding. And there's absolutely nothing that keeps them all from having fun. And that part of it, I think, is a huge improvement. That there's women out surfing now, and kids, and people on every imaginable shape of surfboard. That's the really good side of it. So I think in that sense, it's kind of almost come full circle in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, because I watched a documentary, I think it was on YouTube or something, and it was a documentary about the old style of surfing in the Malibu, San Diego, and they were saying on there that you used to be able to go down to the beach and you could tell who was riding the waves by their style, and it was more like, everyone all on the same wave, more like a party wave, as they say now. And it was that sort of vibe, and everyone was always stoked for everybody, and they were always happy to see other people surfing. And then, as you say, that competitive and that, you know, aggressiveness came into it, and that seems to be drifting away from it again.
And it's really good with someone of your credentials to think that's the way it's going now, because you're obviously your finger on the pulse. You know, there's seawater running through your veins, isn't there? So for you to see that and think that's really nice. A really nice thought that kind of side of surfing and the brands and all that kind of stuff is starting to fade away a little bit, and it's down to the pure joy of surfing now.
And you know, it's not. I want to make sure I emphasize that I'm not criticizing competitive surfing in any way. I love it. I think it's great. I think it progresses the sport immensely. But I think it will always, unfortunately or fortunately, be a relatively small group of people who are going to get to that level of performance.
Yeah.
And that most people are just out there to have fun and enjoy themselves. And that I think that it's come back to that realization now, that maybe because the really good surfers are so separated from the average surfer, that people don't feel compelled to have to try to emulate everything that they do.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right. I think probably 70 to 80% of the people we talk to don't really care much about the WSL. They say, you know, if something amazing happens and it's posted on social media, they'll see it or whatever. But I know a lot of them don't follow the WSL stuff that's going on, and they couldn't tell you who was who, apart from, you know, you've got like a few standout names like Kelly Slater, or, you know, someone like that who everyone knows. But I don't think a lot of people follow it. You know, there is
particularly in the UK.
Yeah, there is a group of people who do follow it and are really keen on it, and have probably just really offended them all. But you know, there's a lot of your average surfer now, I'd say, doesn't really follow it.
And it's like you said, Jim. You know, people don't start out to become a pro surfer. They start out doing it for the fun. So what I was gonna just finish up with and just say, we've got a copy of your book coming, and we've got the PDF version as well. We're super excited to read it. We've had a quick flick through just prior to the interview, so we'll flick through, read it, and we'll put links to it on social media and in our notes for the show on our website.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's really kind of you guys.
Yeah.
I really would love to have another opportunity to get back to England. I'll have to figure out how to do that. Maybe it'll be with the book.
I'm sure there's a job role out there somewhere which is going to be available for you.
There's that, and then you know, if we carry on this list, we're going to be surfing with Jim Kempton, Gregory Harrison. He's also said he'll come over.
Yeah,
you know, the list is growing bigger and bigger.
Better get a bigger house for everybody to stay happy. We'd love to surf with you one day, Jim.
Oh, and I don't know if you know this, but Gregory and I were together just a few days ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really wonderful guy, and he's an old friend of mine. But I'm also working. I know you guys are getting now. You guys are going to give me trouble again. But I've just teamed up with Bruce Brown's son, Dana Brown.
Right. Yeah.
He's quite an accomplished filmmaker himself, and we're doing an episodic television series on the history of surfing, and so it's really fun. And so I asked Gregory if he would narrate for us. So he said, "Oh, you'd love to do that. You know, do it for free." I go, "No, we'll pay you."
Wow.
And so anyway, we went up to near Santa Barbara to a recording studio and spent a couple of days with Gregory up there just last week.
Oh, wow. Well, he came on the show, and he was such a lovely guy. I mean,
yeah,
his voice is amazing, so I can understand why you've chosen him. But as soon as that comes out, let us know, and we will put it out to our listeners, and people will listen.
Okay, thanks so much, you guys.
Cheers.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jim. What an amazing guy.
What an amazing life.
Yeah, super, super jealous.
Yeah. well, I don't know what to say. Like, half the stuff, we just had that stupid thing again where, we forget we're recording a podcast and someone will tell us a story and we're just sat there in complete awe of just...
Yeah, well, we're listening. I'm like sat with my like chin on my hands, just kind of daydreaming of when he's talking. Like,
I went here and I went, and I'm like, imagine that, and like saying the UK was such a big part of his life and career.
Yeah, that's great to hear that, and he knew all the spots as well.
Yeah,
I really really hope he comes back.
Yeah, that would be. Imagine going out and surfing with him. That would be incredible. Imagine going out and surfing with him and Gregory Harrison.
Oh my god,
living the dream.
Yeah. So his book, Women on Waves, is out now.
Yeah, you can order it on Amazon, but he said to us he'd prefer it if you bought it from a surf shop directly. So
yeah,
it's going to be in surf shops all over the place, and it's going to be available in many different places, or it's available from his publicist, Simon and Schuster. We will put a link to that on our website on this page for this podcast on the show notes.
And we're also running a competition to win a copy of the book, Women on Waves by Jim Kempton. So keep an eye out on our social media, on Instagram, and we will send out details on how to win a copy of that incredible book, History of Women Surfing.
Yeah. So before we go, don't forget, head over to Northcore and use the code SURFSHOW, and that will get you 15% off anything you order from Northcore. This has been just a mind-blowing... I mean, like... It's just mind-blowing, this episode, just to speak to Jim. And, like, I can remember being younger in the 1980s. And I can remember being younger, and Surfer Magazine was one of those ones, I'd say actually mid-90s, and I can remember seeing like Wavelength that you used to see over here, and different magazines like that, and every now and then you'd see a copy of Surfer Magazine, and it was like finding the Holy Grail. It was like, oh, there's a copy of Surfer.
Yeah.
Dad, please, can I have it? No, get your own money. But when you found that, like, I expect, back then, being a young lad, there was probably places available all over the place in the UK where you could get it. But I remember finding a copy of it and it being like the Holy Grail, and being like, oh my god! Yeah. And that magazine alone would be worth getting him on here to talk about. Yeah. But
it was just an absolute honour to have him on, and such a major figure for surfing. So yeah, we really, really appreciate him coming on, and we hope you all really enjoyed the chat with him.
Yeah. So thanks a lot for listening. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
See you later.